Hi, everyone. Welcome to the May edition of Aventi Live, where we are going to dive into practical ABM or account-based marketing tips for engaging your customers in a virtual world. So if you're really looking for some fun, creative, innovative ways to communicate and connect with your customers, definitely stick around because our speakers have a wealth of knowledge and experience in this space. Joining me today are Sasha Mostofi-Jorgensen and Eric Rasmussen, who are both Aventi partners, Aventi Group Partners, as well as our special guest, Dave Munn, who is CEO and President and CEO of ITSMA, which is a member-supported business B2B marketing organization who has been a leader in ABM research and training for the last 15 years. Now, before we dive in, a couple of quick things. We love questions and we invite them throughout the chat, so don't be shy. If you have a question, simply publish it as a comment below this chat and we will get to it. If for some reason we don't respond to your question during the chat, we will definitely respond afterwards via a reply to your original comment. And what I want to do, since some of you may not know anything about ITSMA, Dave, will you take a moment to tell us a little bit about your organization and what it does?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Avery, and it's great to be with the Aventi Group on this event. From ITSMA as a company, when we were launched, it was all about advancing marketing practices in the B2B industry, and we started doing work around account-based marketing soon after we started and started conducting research on account-based marketing, providing training and certification programs around it. So it's one of my favorite topics and look forward to discussing that with all of you today.
Great, thanks. I was just activating comments so that I can see them while we're watching this. So why don't we go ahead and dive in? The first area we're going to focus in on is the fact that there are no in-person events. So what opportunities are available with their virtual counterparts, and how can ABM marketers take advantage of these? Eric, do you want to take this first one?
Yeah, well, great. Thanks, Avery. Yeah, so for account-based marketers, a lot of account-based marketers rely on events, and some events have already been transferred over to the digital world. So a lot of industry events, trade shows, they're all becoming virtual. But for account-based marketers, there's generally a lot of smaller, a lot more social, interactive, and honestly a little more fun type events that are part of the marketing mix. So those are things like maybe it's a sporting event, or it's a custom dinner, or a lunch and learn, a unique seminar over a wine tasting or something like that. Those are great experiences, and a strong part of the tactical mix of an account-based marketer to uncover new opportunities, to develop relationships with the existing decision makers, influencers, meet new people, and honestly just have a little fun and have a little bonding. So what is an account-based marketer to do with all those canceled? Actually, there are quite a few things that you can do that you can still have some of these fun, shared, interesting experiences, can still deepen a relationship at account, but doing it virtually. So I'm going to go through a few of these. Now, the first one is kind of like the base foundation one that probably most people have already done. It's the Zoom happy hour. I just wanted to mention it. I was actually just on one last night, in fact. They can be a great opportunity just to get people out and about, to get a little social interaction, which, let's face it, is pretty important these days. Now, if you've already doing that, or you want to go a little bit beyond that, I mentioned wine tasting as an event that had often would occur in the, let's say, the one-to-one or one-to-few account-based marketing type of role. You can do virtual wine tasting. Many wineries now, including local wine shops, are setting up virtual wine tastings. You can get this custom for your groups. You could have a small group of 5, 10, 20 people, whatever you decide. They will take care of sending the same wines. Everybody can taste the same thing out to your contacts or your customers. They'll provide a wine expert to guide your group through the tasting. Again, great way to have a little fun, get a little talking in between, and just a nice experience to provide either for a current or potential customer. I think another one, so the virtual lunch and learns, probably everybody's done some in-person lunch and learns, right? A lot of those. But let me tell you, it's no fun without the lunch part. So there is a company called pizzatime.xyz. they have coordinated pizza delivery all across the country. And that's one of the problems. You don't know, hey, it's Pizza Hut here and Domino's is there. It's kind of a logistical hassle to try to organize, but you can still do a lunch and learn. You can talk about your new product release that's coming out. Maybe have some of your technical teams come on and give a presentation or a training to your audience. You just figure out their names when they all register. Pizza Time will take care of all the delivery, and you've got your great opportunity for a lunch and learn with everybody having a little food. Throw in an extra pizza or two for the person's kids who are also stuck at home, maybe their roommates or their spouse. Great way to get some goodwill in that household, which I guarantee will cross over. And then a couple others real quickly show shared experiences. Right? That was a big part of what these experiences were, right? Let's say you're you're at a charity golfing event, or you're at a sporting event or something like that, or a movie premiere. Those were all, kind of neat account-based marketing tactics that I had done in my career at Juniper Networks. Airbnb is a company that has had tours, like in all their cities where they have properties, and that they've moved a lot of these experiences into digital experiences now. So through Airbnb, you can arrange a custom virtual experience just with your group, again, your targets, prospects, people in the decision-making team at the account you're going after. And they have, really neat stuff. They have everything from cooking, and there's classes for cooking. There's salsa making, pasta making, taco making. They have all kinds of tastings. If you want to do something early in the morning, you can have a coffee tasting led by an expert coffee connoisseur. There's a sake class. There's sangria making, all kinds of fun ones, and even if you want to get a little artsy, dancing, drawing, painting, and the one that I am dying to do, I hope somebody invites me to the roller skate dance party. I think that one would be fantastic. So you kind of bundle these. Maybe you could bundle these with a story time for the kids, right? So a lot of people, they're somewhat hampered by the other responsibilities going on in their house right now. It's hard for them to get away from something that's a little fun. Hey, you can line up a story time, which Airbnb also has on their virtual experiences, so that the kids are taken care of. You get the full attention of that person you're going over. I think all of these you would start or maybe end with a 5 or 10 minute presentation. Maybe again, it's about a new product you have coming out. It's a new opportunity. It's about a joint solution you have. Maybe you have one of your executives come and kick it off for a few minutes. Just a great way to get a virtual experience with your account and keep that momentum going on, or build some and grow some opportunities within a specific account or two.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Although I still would rather do the wine than the roller skating one. Dave, what are you seeing at your organization?
Yeah, thanks, Avery. Eric, some great examples there. It's, the reality today is that events don't have to be boring. Everything that Eric talked about is you can mix business with fun. And we're seeing just so many great examples of what people are doing to engage with their current clients through their ABM programs, as well as new prospects and new executives. And so that's the exciting part. And nothing is off the table. Maybe something should be. So in these times, a huge amount of event reliance in ABM programs, companies are having to get really creative, both in the types and the mix of different events. Senior executives are used to visiting executive briefing centers, going to big events, having connected events with certain subject matter experts. And some of those now, a lot of executives have more time to be on calls with their providers and with potential providers, as long as the topics are relevant. The technical aspects of the programs are run well. Those are things that are always going to resonate. Again, the right topics that are relevant to them. And again, when you're promoting different types of topics and different types of events, they'll attend. Now, one company we work with, Red Hat, open source provider, they were recently purchased by IBM. They've always believed in this concept of inside-in marketing. So Red Hat works with and develops champions within their target accounts to help coordinate, advocate, and recommend a range of different events that they hand-in-hand develop with the Red Hat ABM team. So they've had a lot of success with that with that approach and that technique, and that's something that a lot of companies are looking at.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave. So the second area that we want to dive into for tips focuses in on social media influencers, an area near and dear to my heart, as well as online advertising. Sasha, how can ABM marketers maximize the impact of these two areas?
Great question, Avery. So having an influencer strategy, as you know, is very effective in helping build a community. And once you combine that influencer strategy with an ABM strategy, it becomes even more effective. So when you're having an influencer strategy, we're going out there trying to find influencers within our fields who are have a lot of following online, whether it's on social or they're great bloggers and they have a lot of following there. And we try to engage them in certain activities. It's a mutually beneficial thing where they get the brand recognition and we, on top of it, get to tap into their followers. So once you do that, if you have an ABM list, you can look at your influencers within those ABM accounts. So these are the personas or people who have those certain functions that you're looking for. They might not have the same following as a well-known influencer, but they are still trying to brand themselves. They're trying to network. So if you can get their interest to also get involved in some of these activities, it can really help you build your community. One of the things that I'm involved with right now with one of our clients is essentially we're trying to reach out to both these influencers, the well-known ones, as well as the ones who are within the account list that we're looking for, and trying to see if we can engage them in certain activities, such as, for example, interview them for an online blog post, or we can do video series or podcast series or things like radio shows, etc. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that an influencer strategy like this will not immediately end up in pipeline and opportunities. This is a long-term strategic approach, which will help you build your community over time. And as you the important thing is to continue to engage with them. So by whether it's just engaging with them via social, following these influencers within your ABM accounts, via retweeting, reposting, etc., or going all the way to doing joint webinars or getting them more involved in like a podcast series or a video series. So the point is to keep this engagement going to help you build those your community, and then over time, as you do that, you'll get more opportunities in pipeline. So Dave, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, Sasha, great points on a couple different categories. The value of social influence, influencer management. There clearly it is a long-term investment, and investment's a key word there, and investing in developing those relationships over time, because one email, one phone call isn't going to cut it. One of the things that when we look at a formal ABM program, an ABM successful program, selecting the right accounts, the right type of accounts that are a good fit for you is a key point. But so is the investment in stakeholder mapping, going through formal exercises to understand the people that you're targeting and want to develop relationships with over a period of time, to understand who influences them both internally and externally. Clearly with big buying groups at most B2B companies, there's lots of influencers internally, but also externally. One of the studies that we do every year that we share with a lot of our ABM clients, we look into executive engagement preferences. And it's called our How Executives Engage with Providers study. So that's one of the things that we look at. And top executives, senior executives, will rely on clearly provider executives and provider subject matter experts, but they'll also rely on management consultants, industry analysts and sourcing advisors. They participate in different associations, and they also clearly not participate, but follow and interact and engage with their peers and colleagues. So in looking at your stakeholder maps, all those audiences are trying to understand, as Sasha talked about, who's active on social media and who are the people that they follow, the people you're trying to reach follow, being able to map that out and over time adding and building to, how you're reaching and engaging, hopefully with the right influencers as part of your programs.
Great. Thank you, Dave and Sasha. And we just shared out a link to the engagement preferences study in the comments area on here. And speaking of comments and questions, if we don't get to your question, it's because we're having a little bit of technical difficulty getting the questions feeding in here. So it's not that we're ignoring you, we're just trying to figure out where they're disappearing to. While we're waiting for that, though, let's move on to the third area, because what I love is we're going to build this nice trifecta of practical tips that ABM marketers can do. First, we were looking at virtual meetups, and then we focused in on the social media influencers. And now we're going to move over into the content area and how creating more personal, ultra tailored, customized, relevant content is of benefit. Eric, can you talk to this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the things that I just want to start pointing out is, content. There's tons of content out there already, right? And I think probably one of the things marketers don't want is just more content to create. So we're definitely going to talk about tailoring and prioritizing content rather than just creating more for the sake of creating more. So one of the things that Dave mentioned in his last answer that I'll really take and build off of that is mapping. So account mapping, and especially with in a one-to-one or a one-to-few ABM relationship, who are those key members of the decision-making team, technical as well as business. You got to have those maps. So I'm assuming that's already done. And then I think it's a process of starting to take that map of just who the people are with what content that you might have. And I'm going to talk through that a little bit, this little process here, that it does take a few cycles, but it definitely is not something that requires, it's not rocket science. And say, if I can do it, believe me, you can do it too. All right, so you've got those people mapped out. Then working with your sales team or Salesforce or however you track opportunities, start to map the specific dollar value of opportunities to those mapped targets. From there, you start to figure out which stage of the customer journey is each one of them on. I mean, again, early, mid, late. Perhaps they are there for a product renewal as example. So by mapping all those out, and then I think you take your existing content inventory and you can really closely map it to what people are in what decision stage, with what value of that opportunity based on it, and is there content to get them from stage A to stage B? If there is, great, no more need for new content there. If there is not, then you have not only a need for content, but you can even put a dollar value around the importance of having content to get that specific decision maker or maybe a small group of decision makers from journey stage A to journey stage B or C or whatever it happens to be. And we've done that for a couple clients. We did that when I was at Juniper Networks doing account-based marketing too, and it's a great, powerful tool. You can show a map. Not only of your prioritized content, but then content that actually is not all that important to do, that someone, maybe it's one of the product marketers keeps screaming, hey, I need you guys to do this content. You know what? If you have this content prioritization app, actually, maybe you don't need some other content and you can repurpose those resources in another area. I guess, Avery, just one other little thing I'll say here is I think it's also a time just to test new and different types of content. And there's a couple interesting ones I've seen out there personally. I'm sure there's a lot out there, a lot of agencies I would think that specialize in this kind of have some cool ideas. But I've seen some neat new infographics that are very personal infographics and very interactive infographics. So it's not the static infographic from way back 2 or 3 years ago. Infographics really have changed, come a long way in just a short time. And then I think another one is the ROI model, but I'm going to put a little spin on the ROI model that I think many of us have probably done in our careers over the years. I think now is a great time, especially with an account that you know, an existing customer, to do an update maybe of your ROI model with that customer. So what results did they actually see? How much money did they save? Time did they save? How much of their processes improved, or their error rates gone down, or their reliability up, or whatever it was that the value that your product delivered, and it probably was a business case behind it in the first place. Take an opportunity to update that. Then maybe you can share that through another division or another group within that company, perhaps even a named or worst case generic case study out of it as well.
Great, thanks. And yeah, we're in new times, so it makes sense to test drive and do things you haven't done before and just see if they work. It's a great time for that. Dave, what are you seeing over in ITSMA?
Yeah, thanks, Avery. Eric, some great points there, and all the way from testing to the different types of content to content mapping. When clearly the whole goal, the whole focus of account-based marketing and why that's become so popular, it's the last mile of marketing. How do you take what you have that can address a specific relevant solution to problems that customers have? And so companies are throwing all sorts of content against the wall and hope it's working. One of the studies we conduct, it's an annual benchmarking study on account-based marketing and factors in benchmarks from actual account-based marketers. And they point to personalization is the number one challenge in an ABM program. I mean, yes, budget, yes, resources are up on top of the list too, but personalizing content for individual stakeholders. So, it's for people to understand that it's a challenge, but it's an investment area, and both to look at what is going to be relevant that will get the attention of different executives you're trying to reach. People talk about the topic of nested content, being able to develop a huge body of research, a survey, a presentation, different abstracts, 1 or 2 minute videos, all tied to the same source of content. And people are using base content and then personalizing it by roles, by industry, even geography. That's another thing that we see in studies that we conduct, like the How Executives Engage, is that customers expect you to know their specific issues, their company's issues, clearly their industry, and then third in the line is their role. And so, that takes investment of research, time, energy, and content mapping, as Eric talked about, to be able to reach people. The exciting people, when you hit the right topics, companies will respond, individuals will respond, whether it's somebody you already know or companies that you don't know. One of the studies that I referenced, 2/3 of executives out of 400 knew and understood that they were part of an ABM targeted program. And 90% of those people said, not only was I aware of it, but that more tailored information, that personalized information, content, and invitations helped me, made it more relevant to me and made me more interested in understanding the company or how that organization could help me. So it works. It definitely works.
I always say A is for audience, right? If we make it about them, then they're going to respond. And I have a really strong bias for that. So I loved hearing that. Sasha, I know you have some thoughts on this. Before we dive into it, I just want to let the audience know that in the comments, there is a link off to the ABM benchmark study that Dave referred to. So you can click off and go learn more. Sasha, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think Eric and Dave covered it. The only thing I will add is that as part of your ABM strategy, it's not any different than when you're trying to target outside of ABM. Essentially, you want to map your content to the demand, from a demand gen perspective, to the demand generation funnel, from awareness to consideration to decision, and make sure that as you're doing these tactics, you're moving them through that funnel with the right content.
Great, thanks. So we do have one question. We're being asked, how do you measure the success of an ABM campaign? Dave, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take a quick stab at and start at that. When there's so many different measurements and metrics that you can track as it relates to your ABM programs and in campaigns. They ultimately roll up to what we call the 3 R's: revenue, relationships, and reputation. And those are all things that you're trying to influence and impact over a period of time. And it can vary within a single account. It can vary with an industry group you're going after. But it's important to show those metrics that fall in those categories over short-term, medium-term, and long-term. I mean, ultimately, ABM programs and campaigns are about the long-term. And it's something we've talked about before versus just the short-term. And being able to compare metrics from your ABM accounts versus your non-ABM accounts to be able to show the difference in the return on investment from your different ABM programs and activities.
Mm-hmm.
We have a follow-on question. I don't know if Sasha or Eric, you want to jump in and add anything to what Dave said. So I'll give you a moment and then I'll ask the follow-on question.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick on the metric side. I think like anything in marketing, there's so many metrics you can measure. So it's important to measure the metrics that count, not just the metrics that can be counted. And I think the ones that Dave was talking about relative to pipeline. So pipeline touched, whether that's through an event or content or targeting. I think that's a good one. It's just specifically mapping how the customers, or again, your targets, are moving through the decision process, which for some large accounts, large deals, that can be a year or even a multi-year process. But you can work with the sales teams to quarterly update, or maybe even monthly, but I think quarterly is probably more realistic. How many times each of those people have been contacted? Are they a detractor for how they feel about your company or your deal? Or are they net positive? Are they neutral? And trying to get them to change, not just move along the journey, but just change their perception if they're a blocker of a project, for example, because they prefer another vendor.
Sorry. Yeah, that's good.
So we have actually a couple of questions. To Dave's point, what are examples of personalization that work really well? Is a question we have.
Yeah, so the personalization clearly has to go beyond sir or madam, beyond your first name. We've all seen those emails that it's, dear last name first name second. So, that's a table stakes thing. But the personalization, when we look at that, truly is, being authentic, speaking to something that's specific about the person's issues that they're facing, that are known and understood through research or understanding about them, again, that relate and are relevant to their company, their industry, or potential challenge that they're having. So the personalization has to do with those things. It doesn't mean having to relate to, their dog, unless you know their dog personally, or if you happen to be a neighbor. Those are whole different things. We've seen companies invest in research on individual stakeholders that are pretty creepy. And, I would say being really, really careful about using anything that has to do with, their favorite color, their favorite poem when they're 7 years old. Fill in the blank. But again, it's in a business context, it is about their specific issues, their company issues, their industry, as well as their role that they're in.
So I like that. So when personalizing, don't be creepy. That's a good thing to remember. We do have another question. What are the rules of thumb for estimating budget dollars for an ABM campaign? I know it's dependent on the goals, but what are the rules of thumb?
So I'll take this one. To start with, I think ABM can become very expensive because there's a manual work involved, depending on how personalized you want to get, how much research is involved per account, etc. I think one thing to think about is when you're approaching ABM is to not think about budget and then what you're doing, but versus think about these are the accounts I want to go after. This is the strategy of how I want to approach these accounts, and this is the budget I need for that strategy, right? And then see how much budget you can actually really apply to it. Now, if you've done an ABM strategy before, an ABM campaign before, you can look at your old programs, see what the conversion rates were, and based on that, decide what type of budget you need. If you haven't done an ABM program before, you can look at your marketing, general marketing, other types of campaigns that you have done, look at the conversion rates from MQL to opportunities, look at your ASPs, and see what is the potential for this campaign, and then go backwards and see what your budget needs to be. Mm-hmm. So these are some thoughts.
I'll just chime in there on budgets too. So if you already have an existing account-based marketing program or account-based marketing team, again, they're going to have their budget already. I think actually one of the things that's nice about, I'll just say, the virtual events that I was talking about, if you're doing let's say a dinner or a sporting event or happy hour or something like that, between just the bar bill, the taxes, the facility rental fee, I mean, that you're easily talking several, $300, $400, I've seen some even $500 a person, but let's say at a minimum, it's going to be, $150 or something like that per attendee. And a lot of these virtual ones that I was talking about are half that price or even less. So I even if let's say you're going through a budget reduction cycle right now, which I know certainly some companies are, I think you should have no problem executing these events. And probably just the other thing to add there, when you look at them on a deal size, so hey, just the cost per attendee may be pretty high, but when you start to look at like the cost per attendee per revenue from those deals or from those accounts, then I think it evens the playing field a lot more.
Great. Thank you both for answering that question. So we're going to move on to our fourth area that we're diving into. So if you remember, I said we have this nice trifecta that we're developing of tips. First, virtual events, activities, and how we can tap into them. So virtual meetups, and then social media influencers and online advertising. And then we looked at content. So what we're going to do now is dive into how combining the right mix of these three elements can actually help you achieve better results. Sasha, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so thanks, Avery. Yeah, taking an integrated approach, no matter what you're doing in marketing, is a good idea. So, and when it gets to ABM, it's no different. So rather than doing, for example, a direct mail campaign or doing an event and being done with it and saying, okay, 3 months later, I'm going to do something else for that account, it's good to have kind of this long-term strategic approach and an integrated approach, because there's a variety of ways that you can approach and get to those accounts that you're trying to get to. So that's why one of the things that I really like in marketing is the integrated marketing campaigns, which is essentially looking, and it applies the same way to an ABM list. You can look at your ABM list and say, okay, what is the message I want to get to this list? Then what's the theme associated with this campaign and the content that is relevant, as all the great content that we talked about. You create and map it to the buyer's journey. And then after that, you start looking at tactics and look at what are some of these tactics that I can execute on in order to reach my target audience. Now, it's going to be different. There's a lot of different ways of doing that. And for each organization, based on budget, et cetera, and resources and your goals, it's going to be different. But for example, you can do, say, a drip email campaign while you're feeding the relevant content that you've created to your list. And at the same time, you can run some online ads like LinkedIn ads or other types of ads where you target that account specifically. You can also, or for example, you can do a direct mail campaign, and some companies, believe it or not, get great results out of that, where you send, for example, you can send half of something, and then they take an action, and then you get them the other half. So something that I was talking to a client of mine recently was essentially sending our personas within these ABM lists a band of Apple Watch. And then if they come and fill out an online survey or take an action, they get the actual watch. And then sales can contact them to follow up with it. But at the same time, You can also, again, run online ads targeting that account to stay top of mind, and also do social ABM or different types of strategies combined even with drip email campaigns. So there's a lot of tactics, and the flow is something that you have to figure out. The idea isn't to overwhelm them. You don't want to keep targeting the same person over and over again. But say, for example, if you have sending a gift to the head of IT, you're running ads targeting that company and the functions within that company, maybe people within the networking and IT department. So when they're sitting in the meeting and the head of IT says, hey, you know, I received a gift, the networking manager says, oh, I know that company, I've heard about them, right? So it helps with increasing brand awareness, and it also helps pushing the deal or opportunity along. Now, again, it does depend on your budget, resources, time, etc. But it is good to take an integrated approach, I believe. Dave, do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. It's we live in a omni-channel world right now, multi-channel, where executives are consuming content, attending different types of events, both in person and online, and digitally. So, that mix of resources, we all in ABM programs do have a mix of different types of activities and programs. And like you said, it's so important to really look at what is the audience that we're trying to reach, who are the specific people we're trying to reach, and what are a mix of tactics and campaigns to help develop and nurture relationships with them over time. There's no such thing as a silver bullet tactic anymore. There were some that used to be that way, that would be like money that you could always rely on. But there's, again, so many channels of information. So really thinking about what are those channels and types of content and sources that your targets are going to use. And again, adding back in that creative factor, some of those examples that you use, because that does get people's attention. But also, once you have their attention, do you have content, programs, people, and activities that will continue to develop the trust that you want to build over time, so they become a customer, or they buy more from you, or they become an advocate. So we do have, in some of these studies that I've talked about, rankings of what types of tactics people are using the most. Does that mean they're most successful? Not always. But in an ABM world, it is a mix of both. And in your one-to-one programs, there's more of the personal activities now that are being done virtually, executive conversations, and peer exchange virtual events. Those things are happening, but it's hard to do peer-to-peer exchange events unless if you're trying to do that for a mass audience, where you might have one customer speaking that other customers want to listen to, but that's not quite a peer exchange. It might be a presenter. So all those things come into play. So it's fun and exciting to look at, and like you said, within hopefully within budget. If not, when in doubt, ask sales. They have money. Do not forget that. It doesn't always have to come out of marketing's pouch.
I love that. Now, people are going to think we deliberately teed that phrase up for the question that I have sitting here from the audience, but it wasn't, but it's a perfect tee up. So the next question we have is, what expectations should marketers set with their sales teams who are eager for SQL and SALs? Sorry.
What expectation? What? Can you repeat that question?
What expectations should marketers set with sales teams who are eager, I'm going to say, for results?
Well, it goes back to conversion rates a little bit, right? So if you know the conversion rates of your programs, you can essentially calculate as to what those results are going to be. So you can give a realistic idea of what they're going to be expecting. Of course, sales, you have to be very clear about expectations. You need to set it up in advance, because for sales, if they give you 100 names, they're expecting 50 to 100 response, and that's not how it works, as we know. Depending on how warm the list is, depending on how much they've been nurtured, do they even know your brand? So there's a lot of factors involved that needs to be taken into consideration. But I think understanding your conversion rates as far as MQLs, SQLs, SALs are concerned, and then be able to set the expectation correctly with sales upfront is very important.
So we have a follow-on question as well on what do you do when gifts from vendors are not allowed by corporate policy?
Gifts from vendors are not allowed.
When gifts, so
Yes.
the Apple Watch, for example. So when gifts from vendors are not allowed by corporate policy.
That is something that you can run into. So you have to decide in advance whether that account makes sense to send it to, right? At some point you decide that's if the gift is not going to work, then you have to try a different tactic or strategy to approach that audience. So.
And the one thing I'd say there is there's I think any government agency, they have very strict policies on that. A lot of companies, or if it's not a government or some other type of regulatory body, typically they will have a threshold limit of $100 or $50 or something like that, and you can still get some pretty neat, interesting things that are less than whether it's 50 or 100, or depending on the organization, it may be higher. But just one thing, I too love the direct mail option, and there's some interesting companies now that are using machine learning and to a bit developing a digital signature of somebody, and so that they can go out and find that person's interest. So let's say they're still going to get a sub $50 high-end direct mail piece or gift, but it's a backgammon board because the person's really into backgammon or something along those lines. And I'm cognizant of Dave's point of trying to be creepy, but I think the other thing about on the flip side with direct mail right now is, everybody's at home. There's nobody who's from the office traveling on planes for weeks. There's no receptionist who's going to get the package, or it's just going to be stuck in the mailroom and never be delivered. So I think you actually got a very high hit rate, probably the highest it will ever be. So I'd say go while sheltering is still around.
So actually, Sridhar shared up another option as well for companies who have a policy against gifts, and that is to donate to a nonprofit in lieu of giving a gift to the person on your list. So I actually like that idea, and we've seen some companies doing those kind of things. So that's actually something else to keep in mind.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Good. So before we close out, I want to ask each of our speakers, we've talked about all these great ideas, and some take longer to do than others. So for each of you, what's one thing you would recommend to the people who are listening that they can get started on right away, quickly?
I can start with that. I would say that content syndication is one of the ones that I like to get going really fast. So content syndication, you can essentially look within your field or industry. There are a lot of publications out there and different vendors who will do this for you. You can provide them with your list and your personas and all the great content that you've created, and try to get them to engage those personas and have them download these assets. Now, these leads are not going to be sales ready. They're not MQLs, but you have to push them into nurture and have them be nurtured until they get to a point that they're ready to be contacted by sales. But I think it's a great way to get started, to just try something quick. It's an easy way to get going.
I'll tell you, I'll go. I will go with the combo, with some type of virtual tasting plus a story time or something like that for the kid. I think for that tasting, I would keep it low key, keep it casual. Have the person, if they want to bring their spouse, they're more than well, or roommate or whomever. I would open it up for that, and whether it's coffee or coffee tasting, wine tasting, sparkling water, whatever, it's something that's fairly easy to do. It can be executed, it can be mailed, it's fairly low price, fairly low hurdle rate too, and it's a way of getting your feet wet. I think it could be a great thing to partner with sales as well, and start out with a little product pitch, something like that, which I think all salespeople would really like, and they will be supporters of your metrics, whether even if you don't hit them, which I know never happens for marketers, but on the rare occasion that it does.
And Dave?
Yeah, there's a couple points. I mean, everything about ABM is the investment in planning different activities. So if there's a new campaign, a new group of companies or executives you're trying to reach, is, take some time to plan out what you're trying to accomplish, incorporate and collaborate with sales, work with different parts of your company, see what assets exist and content exists. ABMers should think of themselves as orchestrators, not necessarily always doing everything themselves. Some of us are really good at certain things in marketing and not good at others. And I know where those exist for me. So, as to be successful in ABM, the investment in time and planning, there's all sorts of ideas that we've talked about here. And if you're planning and you try some things and trial them, keep trialing new things, because they are going to work. And that's the great thing about what we do as in account-based marketing, is have an opportunity to start making progress and reaching people, executives, and companies that your company really wants relationships with and want to advance.
Those are all great. Now, we did get one last question in, and so what I'm going to do is, what are some essential tools that should be part of an ABM campaign? And we don't want to go in depth because we're wrapping up here, but why don't each of you name one essential tool that you think is critical? Dave, why don't you start first?
Yeah, sure. I think for, most companies have with their ABM programs, marketing automation software. I mean, that's the command center for any and all ABM programs. That's the vehicle that connects with your CRM system, but being able to use that to plan and orchestrate activities and programs targeted at specific people. More and more of the companies out there, from Salesforce and HubSpot and Oracle and SAP and Adobe, have these marketing suites, these marketing cloud suites that include all sorts of aspects. So, looking at those companies, and they all have a marketing automation component, are extremely valuable in managing, orchestrating, and planning ABM programs and campaigns.
Eric?
Yeah, I really don't have anything other than the ones Dave mentioned. I mean, I guess I think it's probably just, it's so dependent on having a well mapped out, let's say any tool that helps you map out the contacts and where kind of your current state with them. So at Juniper, we would map out, and we would color code basically like a heat sheet of red, yellow, green of the top, 10, 20, 30 contacts at each account, and with their little their names, color code each one of them. And I think when you have something like that, that kind of helps define your strategy and what you want to do. And then there's multiple tools that you can use to help progress those. But having that base foundation of information is critical before you even get to the tool.
Yeah.
Right.
Sasha, do you have anything?
Yeah, and I think, the back end systems that Eric and Dave have been talking about, Marketo, Eloqua, HubSpot, these are the essential piece of tracking what you're doing. Any other tool that you have is based on your strategy and what you're trying to do. So there are a variety of ways you can do things. Personalization for your website. You can look at platforms that help you with retargeting. There are a lot of tools out there and a lot of options. So the basic is to have the back-end systems in place so you can track your activities, and the rest you add based on what you need.
Yeah. And one company I forgot to mention, Engagio, which is completely architected for ABM programs and ABM program activities.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Eric, Sasha, and Dave. You guys have shared a wealth of information, and I know I really appreciate it, as do, I'm sure, our audience. And speaking of audience, I want to thank everyone who joined this live chat and asked questions. We do love it when we have people participating with us. So with that, we're going to close out and say thank you for joining, and we'll see you next month with our upcoming Aventi Live, which will focus on go-to-market strategies. Until then, have a great day.
Thanks, Avery.
Thanks, Avery.
Bye, Eric and Sasha.